Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 88 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Another week, another rousing round of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen news and views where we celebrate the community who plan to make this their next MMO home. This week, we get technical, commenting on a VIP roundtable all about Pantheon's programming. We see what the community thinks about some images that VR dropped, and we delve further into the lore of Terminus's Age of Chaos. As always, we hope you can spend the next hour with us, listening, chatting, and just hanging out, as I, Theric, and my robust co-host, Desrin, and we deliver this week's Rewind. Oh, Desrin. You know what? I am so burned out from work. I didn't even come up with a funny story to tell this week.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm robust, so let me...
Yeah, do you like that?
That's a good one.
Every week I try to, when it's our turn to do the introduction, I try to have a funny, and I know you do too, and I was neighborly last week, and robust, as you know, is a bit of a running gag in the Pantheon community, so I figured it was appropriate, because it's, as you know, Joppa's one of his favorite words, describes many systems in the game as being robust, and it's a great word. I think I've come to appreciate robust, and I see you as being very robust. You're well-rounded, you're a man of many insights and talents, and I would put you right up there with Pantheon's climbing and perception systems. So anyway, that's my compliment of the day. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. A bit of a scramble today, but I think we're good. I think I've had a weird rekindling of MMO addiction this last week.
That's
and I know you know why.
I do.
But I gotta say, in one sense, man, it's just that feeling feels good, and so I'm kind of riding on that, and just enjoying it, enjoying new stuff, enjoying that feeling, and really just I don't know, makes me look forward to Pantheon even more.
Yeah, I went through that not that long ago with Final Fantasy XIV, actually. I always call it a game getting its hooks into you. And when they get the hooks in, you feel them constantly. And MMOs are very particular, and not a lot of their games can do the kind of hooks that MMOs can. And I think that's why we love them so much. Because I was feeling the same way with Final Fantasy XIV. And I know you're talking about Mortal Online too, and your experiences there. And that feeling of, you can't wait to get back in there and try this. And I want to, I've got plans, I've got things I want to do, and it's like, yeah. So I'm glad you're experiencing that, and I've fallen off a little bit with Final Fantasy XIV, but I'm still playing. I just got busy with other stuff, but yeah, like the day when we're all playing Pantheon, man, and we're all in the hooks are the same for everybody. It's gonna be great, right?
Yep. The hooks are gonna be strong, and I'm not a catch and release kind of a person, so I mean.
Nice. Yeah. No, I know. I'm like a fish. I'm just like hook and mouth all the way. Reel me in, throw me on the boat, hit me on the head, and call it a day, right? So, I should just stop. I'm rambling because I'm tired. It's been a long week, but I'll stop before I get myself in trouble. Anyway, so let's thank our adventuring party for the week. We have another good looking party. In fact, we have a two-boxing adventure party member, which is a hot topic actually. So Shuriken, our resident dwarf cleric, is dual boxing a dwarf wizard as well. So that's pretty cool. That's the first time for that. We've also got Breakout on the Archive Shaman. We've got Fazul EQ on the Halfling Enchanter. Ziplox, our resident Darkmer Rogue, Jason, our Scar Beardlord, Sparoh, the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code, the Human Wizard, Screech, the Scar Bard, Man of Rohan is back on the Ember Elf Ranger, and Brian Reck on the Gnome Summoner. So there's your adventuring party, and as always, I want to thank everyone who donated during the show last week. I also want to remember to thank Sparoh for doing the graphic for the adventuring party, which she does an amazing job of every week, and is very graciously donating her time to do that. So again, thanks everyone for hanging out last week and supporting the show. It always does mean a ton to us. If you want to do so, you can just drop a donation during the YouTube premiere on Sunday morning through the super chat. We also have a Patreon campaign that you can check out as well if you want to do it through another means. But again, always going to be just a show for everybody. No nothing behind any kind of paywall or anything like that. It's always, your being here is just that's the part we look forward to the most.
That's right.
Yeah. So this is the show, and we are going to get going. Desrin, are you ready to start?
Let's do this.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. Okay, so VR News and Notes, we're going to recap the January VIP Developers Roundtable today. That was released on Friday, February 4th to the public. Again, if you were a VIP, you've had access to this for a week already. But this one was titled Programming with Chris and Kyle. And so it's Joppa and Kyle, and I'm not going to say his little name because he does it on purpose to make it hard to pronounce, which I'll
It's EG.
EG, I don't know, whatever.
It's EG. It's not that bad.
It's tough. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good when you say it. It comes off the tongue awkwardly. And anyway, so he's going to be Kyle to me, and I'm going to leave him as Kyle. But he is also the main highlight in this roundtable because he is talking about his programming skills and wizardry, and a couple of the big topics. And I think the biggest one that they covered here was the network stack. So if you've been following Pantheon closely, you know that the network stack is the next major task on their list. It's been on the to-do list for a while now. It was originally scheduled for late last year. It's been delayed or put off for a little bit, but they got into why that is, and we'll get into that here because there were a lot of questions about it. And the first question was, what is the first thing to do after the network stack is in? So Joppa talked about stress testing being the next step after that network stack goes in, and then moving on to pet implementation to allow them to complete the class rosters, which, I know they're very eager to do that, and it comes up every time on the monthly newsletter, and it comes up every time on the dev streams, about the classes. So they're big on that. Kyle mentioned rebuilding the navigation system. He talked a little bit about using tile-based streaming and then iterating on the network library due to some changes in Unity's abilities. So again, throughout the theme of this whole roundtable, and when we're talking about it, there's going to be a lot of technical speak that we can't exactly, go into too much depth on or explain in great detail like they can. But certainly there's some interesting pieces here because, Kyle did say they need to integrate the game with their network technology and then holding off doing that until the HDRP client is stable. They're preparing for that and they know they have to do this. So, Joppa added into that a little bit and talked about how Kyle, because the idea being, well, what can we do while we're waiting for this to happen? What else can Kyle do? If he can't do the networking stack, what can he do? And there was a lot of talk about the library itself and preparing for that integration. So Joppa said it's not on hold, like he's not completely on hold. And how their network library is a separate entity in and of itself. It's actually been licensed out to other companies, and they talked quite a bit. There was I don't know, Desmond, if you picked up on it, but it seemed like there was a lot of new information here about the network library itself, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I actually had a little bit of extra information from Robert to clarify that whole hooking up process that nice. I thought I might throw in here if it was permitted. He did give me permission to use this, so because it is from the official Discord. So, right. But he likens it to they've got this shiny new V12 engine, and it's hooked up to the test bench right now, and it performs like magic, but you could think of Pantheon at the moment like, some, you give some, reference here to a car that I don't even know because I'm not a car person. So, but, not a great car. It does work, but it gets you from A to B. But
utilitarian.
But it has a lot of issues. And when you cram a lot of people in it's not a great experience. So basically, Kyle just needs time to remove the old engine and to drop the V12 in there and hook it up. So it might sound simple, but there's a lot of wires, there's a lot of stuff to that, but that is essentially all it means when they're talking about integrating the network stack. And I was like, that's a pretty straightforward analogy. It's like we have this old car, it works, but if we drop this, new engine in it, it's going to be a show car,
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. And it's interesting because now that process, Kyle can do other things while they're preparing for that process. And the library is the piece that I found really interesting. And they actually has a name, right? It's called Vinyl. That's the name of their network library. And they said a little later in the roundtable that it's an acronym for Visionary Realms Incorporated Network Library. And they're licensing it out to other companies. And this isn't new news. They've talked about this before. In fact, Ben Dean did a interview with Nathan Napalm where he talked about this quite a bit. But I found it really interesting because the question was asked, what kind of a library is it? Kyle clarified that it's a UDP socket library, which of course doesn't mean anything to me, but I'm sure it means a lot to some people out there. But it's got a focus on Unity's engine. And they said that this is something that is not really available. Like it's not commonly available on the market. It's something that they are creating to sort of, as a separate entity, but for use in Pantheon, of course, but also something that they can create separately. So I think that it's interesting that they're focused on this aspect of it right now and building this library. What do you think about that, Desmond? Do you have anything on that?
Well, I mean, it's hard to really describe, I think, a library beyond the example that Robert gave. Right. But the idea that they're basically creating this separate solution that can be licensed out, is really, I mean, it's really neat because I think you've probably heard this before from a lot of people in the MMO space outside of game development that will say why do all these companies have to make their own custom stuff for their MMO? Why hasn't someone just made an MMO engine, right? And
right, yeah.
And so I think this is actually an example of it's not an MMO engine because I mean that's not really even a accurate term or anything, but it is something that other MMOs that are made in Unity might be able to take advantage of. And the reason that companies make these custom solutions is because no one has an MMO engine, and Kyle making this, it might mean something at least on the road to that. And so I really like the idea of them doing this. I think it's really, really smart, and especially because Unity is so well adopted at this point. And who knows, this might lead to other MMOs in the space made in Unity because it has a somewhat pre-made solution that works for this kind of a game. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's really cool too. And it sort of reminds you or makes you think of, and it's almost got a bad connotation, but MMOs doing concurrent design or concurrent building of other things while they're building their MMO. So you get into these, all these bad examples of other MMOs that make a side game to support their game financially. But VR seems to be doing is making something that they're going to use for their game, for Pantheon, but also something that can stand on its own and be licensed out and make money and support the game financially, which I can't think of another example of that. I'm not the most industry insider kind of person when it comes to this stuff, but I don't know if this has been done before. And it's something that it seems like a really good idea. Of course, the question was asked in the roundtable, how much development time goes into this? Does this take away from developing other aspects of Pantheon? As which is a normal sort of question, I think, in a normal even, like a concern, I guess. Kyle said it hasn't really impacted them, given the small scope at this time, and it's not taking away from any of their dev time. Like I said earlier, Kyle can work on this while other aspects are unavailable for him to work on. So I just think it's an interesting thing. And, the takeaway here is that they still need to get the HDRP client stable before this network stack can be implemented. And there's this sort of asynchronous, development going on that Kyle can attend to. So I'm interested to know, the sort of steps involved. They got to get the HDRP client stable. What is that going to look like? I think that how big of a process is that? What do you think we're looking at there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can't really speak to exactly what they mean by that, because it's pretty broad, phrase. We need it to be stable, and it's okay, stable for an alpha, right?
Right.
But right. I would expect that they would want stability to be at least on par with what they've had in their previous clients. So, just very little crashes and very little, tech-related issues during gameplay. But obviously, it is an alpha, so I'm going to expect things. But I do know that they want to have a higher standard for alpha as well. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that actually there's a lot to take from this other than they want it to be stable before they start really getting crazy with hooking everying in.
Right. Yeah. I find it incredible that they share this much technical detail. When, let's be honest, there's competing MMO developers out there, I'm sure, who listen to this, right? I find it very a good karma thing, or very much a show of trust on their part or not even trust, but goodwill, I guess is a better way of putting it. It speaks to how they look at the VR or look at the MMO genre, I guess, right now. They've used the phrase that a rising tide, lifts all boats. And I think that's kind of, this is an example of that, because they're putting this information out there. They're really talking about their technical behind the scenes stuff. Mm-hmm. And like I said, what's to stop another MMO developer from listening to this and saying, "Oh, that's a really good idea. We should totally be doing this."
We should make our own network library and license it out. We should, I totally agree. It is a very open thing to do, and I do believe, they've talked about Kyle working on a network solution for a long time, but it is out there publicly. It's on their corporate website. But I completely agree, and I love, and I'm probably exhaustive on this topic, but I love the indie space for this kind of openness. It really has this sense of everyone's in this together. We're all just trying to make our passion work. And I just feel that so much with VR and how they kind of approach these things. And there's always going to be more information that people want, but this is really, really great and telling about how they want to operate.
Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't hear a big, you wouldn't hear EA or, Ubisoft come out and talk about, the technical aspects of what they're doing from down to this granular level. Right. So I think it's definitely unique to the indie dev space. So I agree with you. Somebody asked after the networking, what's the next most challenging thing to do? The funny answer was that's really nothing after this. I mean,
yeah,
this is the big thing. And really nothing stands up to being as challenging as the networking aspect, which makes sense. Of course, it's an MMO, right? And you're talking about, that's what sets it apart from every other video game out there. But they did say a couple things. Basically talking about encounter designs. Kyle said they want to iterate on some of the boss design tools. They want to focus on that. Joppa sort of talked about the weather systems, he said. They want to get that dialed in a little bit more, but it almost felt like they were
yeah, just picking some random,
they were really struggling to to say what would be harder than the networking. And so that's a good thing. I kind of liked that. It sounds like you did as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny thing because the Java mentioned the weather, because it's not something I think players think a lot about, but I've actually seen several games and I'm sure y'all have played several games that actually really struggle to sync weather effects in MMOs. Like, it's especially difficult because you want to make sure that players that aren't even close to each other are experiencing the same thing, right? But you don't want to expend the resources to have them talk to each other when there's no like real relevant reason they should be. And so
Right.
it's already like actually more complicated than it seems, but not to mention like Pantheon, they don't want just VFX and audio, right? Like they want it to mean something. So I could see that actually being a bit challenging. But on the boss stuff, man, I'm just glad to hear that that's like such a forefront of their mind, because the more boss mechanics, like the more tools that designers have to make those, the better. And so, yes, please.
Yeah, right. I know. I'm totally of the same opinion. I mean, the more they can focus on that, we're gonna get. That just makes funner fights for us, right? We get these interesting fights and stuff like that. So yeah, no, it'd be interesting to see. When the networking is all taken care of, and that's they move on to the next step. What the next sort of phase of the journey sounds like. Now, this is the big topic, and I think there's a lot to talk about here, but smart leashing was something that came up during this roundtable. It's so much so that they actually released a piece of this roundtable earlier this week to the public under their Fragments of Terminus series, which is like these, very short and, 1 minute, 2 minute little sound bites from a roundtable. So if you don't know what the term is, leashing, basically it's talking about, the strength and like the nature of a mob's connection to you after you engage with it. So Chris and Kyle talked about how there's going to be some factors in both the NPC type, their abilities, their traits, and these will all affect how far the mob's going to chase you, like things, whether it'll aggro others along the way, whether it becomes weakened the longer it chases you, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of variables at play here, which they're basically calling smart leashing. And we've seen some of this in the gameplay demos we've seen in the streams that some people have been able to show how Pantheon's mobs are capable of like this really sophisticated targeting logic. So there was a stream, the last co-stream, I think, one of the questions that came up was, I think Co asked it, he said, can players escape climb to escape combat, right? And Joppa was just like, oh yeah, but don't worry, every mob's going to have a way to knock you off that wall, get you down from that tree, whatever you're climbing, And so this is what they're sort of getting at, again, on a smaller scale, but from a leashing standpoint, the idea is the same. So it's an interesting topic, and I think we could probably talk for quite a while about this, but when they said there's no more zone lines, leashing took on a pretty big role. Yeah,
that was like the first thing that people thought of, oddly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think they're so connected. I was thinking about this actually today as I was driving home from the grocery store. When you're out in the world, like this has a real connection to human behavior. If I'm out in the world, if I break a window, right, I'm walking down the street, I decide, I'm going to break this window. Going. You know where this is going. If the cops chase me and I only have to get away 2 blocks before I know they're going to give up, there's nothing stopping me. Like as long as I know that I know what my length or my, the ground I have to cover to get away from any sort of consequence, then I'm pretty much free to do whatever I want, right? But if if the leashing is long or it's variable and I don't know, or maybe there's some randomness in terms of the mob's disposition that they could spawn with, it completely changes everything. It completely changes how free you feel in the world to try and do things, right?
Yeah.
Not that you're not free, but what kind of risks you might be taking. So there's a lot. And I personally love that increased underlying logic and the complexity of the challenges and the choices. So what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I completely agree with you. Did want to point out that this ties directly into what you talked about earlier, or what was asked earlier, which was them having to rebuild the navigation system into something tiled, which is something that basically like a mob has a certain awareness around them about the geometry of the world, called like the navigation mesh. You've probably heard of that. But so now that the world's seamless, they kind of want to load that in as it moves, right?
Right.
And so that's what they're talking about there. And obviously we want that. But being something that kind of goes with the mob while it moves is really interesting because if you let your mind wander a little bit, you could imagine trying to pull NPCs into things they might have trouble with. And I think just to see how the NPC reacts, when they're like, oh, I'm in like this kind of an area, how am I going to choose to navigate that? But I think what you're talking about with just like all the options that they're going to have, I feel like that kind of logic, like I just see how that's going to play out. And if they really do have this huge array of options that could be available to take leashing and chasing to the next level. I mean, again, VR is just taking an MMO gameplay feature that's gone completely stale and trying to spice it up. And I love the approach. Like, it's such a simple thing. And I think leashing is something, it's such a simple mechanic that people have learned to rely on it, right? Like there's straight up strategies in these games that rely on manipulating mob leashes. And we've gone 20 some years just exploiting this mechanic. And and now VR's like, it's literally the same after like 20 some years. Why don't we make it an interesting part of gameplay where you can never count, you can't count on that really simple mechanic anymore? I think it really is going to change how people approach danger.
Yeah. It's going to be a refresh, a refresh in your mindset about when you're out there wandering around and, what you can take on and what you can't and what could happen if you make the wrong choice. I think it, you mentioned it's gone stale in other games, and honestly, it's not even gone stale. It's just been eliminated in most games, like there's no, well, I mean, a lot of games, honestly, the open world has been eliminated. Now we're very much in the lobby system of, MMOs where there's not really that open world to run around in as much anymore. And so leashing isn't necessarily a thing. But I'm, thinking about the linear sort of corridors that we run through in like Guild Wars or Final Fantasy, right? The leashing isn't even, it isn't even something you have to consider because that you can just plow through it. For one, it's not really, that challenging to plow through it. And if you choose not to, then you're just trying to get to that next waypoint where that, all that stuff from before has gone away, right? So it's not even on the same playing field anymore. It's on this different sort of, different type of playing field, I guess you might say. So I think this is really interesting and I think there's a lot to be seen and heard still about this. So keep an ear open for this because I think we're going to hear more about it. One of the questions was asked, when will we see an increased cycle of PA tests? When will we see the next one? Yeah, of course. That's always a question. And Joppa was pretty clear, actually. He said there's 3 things that need to get done. He said, first, there's a few critical design bugs to address. Next, they want to get the water and the day-night system in place, which I mentioned before. And then lastly, they want to get the conversion of the visual effects to the HDRP rendering pipeline. So those are the 3 things that need to get done before they start scheduling more pre-alpha testing sessions. So keep that in mind if you're looking at, your pledge, or if you're thinking about, getting to a point where you can join those pre-alpha sessions. But, we don't know what the schedule is in terms of, again, they haven't started scheduling them yet, so it's a little bit hard to say. What's your thoughts on that, Des?
Well, I mean, it's here when it's here, right? But I think if I'm remembering right, there is a mention in here that I don't want to kind of go unheard, and that's that against popular belief, they don't require the network stack to do the next PA test. Like they basically, they can use the old networking solution for the next test. Obviously, I'm sure they don't want to. But
well, they did say the next one's going to be in the new HDRP client.
yes, which a lot of people seem to take to mean the networking as well. And so the little bit of clarity there is that while a lot of people see, the networking getting delayed, meaning, oh, well, that probably means testing is delayed. It's not exactly like that. Again, these are semi-separate entities. So, I mean, I'm even with the old networking, like I'd be happy to get in the HDRP client, but.
Well, it's about doing it efficiently. We've talked about before. So think about what I said in the beginning, right? That what do they want to do once the networking stack is ready to go? They want to they want to do a stress test. I mean, that sounds like a PA test, right? Like that. So I don't know if they would, if there's a need for it. I said this before when they did the last PA test. I said, if there's a need for a test session, go for it. Like they should totally do it. But if there's no need for it, like if it's not testing anything they need testing, I'm fine not. Like they should not do those because they'd just be a waste of time. But
yep.
So they said they want a stable HDRP client. Okay, so we need to test the HDRP client. If that's what the need is, then let's get in there and do that. Hopefully, I'm all for doing it sooner rather than later, but I'm more for doing it efficiently.
That's right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Couple of quick things they talked about, which I thought were interesting and worth mentioning. The question came up about raid scaling, and Joppa said it's on the list for testing and measuring during later testing stages. It is something they want to try. And they said Joppa said it's worked well in some other games and not in others. So it's on the list of things to look at. There wasn't really any definitive answer about, how that's going to happen, what they're going to do with that. I just thought it was an interesting question that they actually it was asked and provided an answer about.
Yeah, because but why would they want to commit to a design decision before testing it with players? But I am glad they're looking into it because I wouldn't be able to say one way or another whether raid scaling is a good thing or a bad thing until it's in the game and we try to break it. So, but I am glad he's thinking about it.
Yeah, and it goes back to that encounter design that they want to make sure that they get that correct before the game is ready to go.
Yeah. And
then the last thing that they brought up that I thought was super cool and just sort of makes me feel good is they talked about characters being tied to servers. So Joppa and Kyle reinforced, just how important it is to have your character tied to the server. They said, it's sort of in the DNA of Pantheon. Because of reputation, because of infamy, all the things that go along with that are very important to the tenets of what Pantheon is going for. Because the question was asked, is this a technical issue that you're going to have to overcome? And Kyle's like, no, it's not a technical limitation at all. It's completely a design choice, right? So they said, not like other MMOs, where you can basically ninja loot yourself all day long. You're never going to see those people you're grouped with again. So therefore you're free to sort of do whatever you want. Music to my ears, right? Like this is part of Pantheon for me. And that's that community where I might be grouped with you today. And then I might see you again in a few weeks on a random pug group, right? And I know, okay, I remember you and this is our experience last time. We had a good group. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you again, or maybe vice versa. So. You like this too, I bet.
Yeah. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, but I am seeing this right now in Mortal, and every time I notice it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for this in Pantheon. It's like I'll see the same people, especially because everything's so localized. You're basically living out of a town, and so you see the same people all the time, and you get impressions of them and recognize names, and I'm so about that connection and no, reneging if you're a jerk or if you do something good or whatever. But I know the first thing that people think of with characters being on a server and there being multiple servers and transfers and everything is but I want to play with my friend on another server, so let me transfer, and I'm guessing eventually they'll have that service, right? It's pretty standard in MMOs, but I really do hope that it's kind of that classic style where it's there's a charge for the service and a timeout before you can do it again.
Yeah.
So because obviously I want people to be able to play with their friends, but I think the server community is just so pivotal to the like recreation and expansion of that thing we're looking for in MMOs that we had in the past. And I can't help but point out, if you only play with your friends that you already know, you're kind of missing out on that magic on purpose. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's the thing that, I mean, of course, there's going to need to be a service where you can transfer your character to another server. But again, like you said, it has to be costly. It has to be inconvenient. And none of this sort of free form, just moving around wherever I'm I'm on one server today and I'm one server tomorrow and then another one another day. It can't be that loose. There has to be some, some cohesion to the server that keeps people, in part of that community. So, again, so I'm music to my ears. I like hearing that. And I think that's the highlights from the roundtable. Desert. Was there anything else on it that they talked about that you wanted to bring up?
Oh man. Well, I mean, obviously I really enjoyed this, and it was a lot. Like we were kind of expecting, like this is going to be a rather heavy one. But I mean, I thought it was excellent. I'm sure people still have some questions. Like I said, not everyone is going to be up to speed on the same page all the time. But I did want to kind of let folks know that if you want, I'll try. And I mean try, because again, I'm just a hobbyist and someone that's been interested in these things for a long time. But I'd love to help to explain things in the Pantheon Plus Discord if people want to talk. Also, I mentioned this earlier. Since I am VIP, I wanted to share some kind of clarifications that Robert made after the stream on the official Discord that I got permission to use. So feel free to throw some stuff at me in the Pantheon chat channel on the Pantheon Plus Discord, and I'll try to get to it if you still have some things you're wondering, applying to the questions and thoughts during the DRT. Obviously, I am not going to be able to answer any additional things. I'm not like VR staff, right? But
you know what's coming
things,
now. Yeah,
for sure.
People are going to be looking to you for secret info, but of course that's not something you can do. But I have to say, I have to give you props for your Mortal Online too. I mean, honestly, you're like a guide in terms of that game. I haven't played it yet. I actually did buy it, and I haven't started it up yet.
That's probably for the best right now. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that is true based on what I've seen. But you've been so informative. So if people are like looking for like to get into Mortal Online 2, you just check out the Discord, the Pantheon Plus Discord, because Desmond's done a great job of laying out the systems, giving the pluses, giving the negatives, sort of talking about what's good, what's bad, and what's sort of in between right now. You've been a super good resource for that, so well on you, man.
Thanks. But yeah, keep in mind I am only one person, so don't be like offended if I don't like respond right away or whatever. But yeah, I mean that the network stuff, I'll do my best to answer. The everything from the DRT, it's really fun topics for me. So even if I don't know, I can try to research and then re-explain in a hopefully more understandable manner. And like I said, got a few quotes from Mr. Robert C. here, just in case it helps as well, because he's got a totally different way of describing things than Kyle, and it's a good thing. So, but yeah.
Yeah, right on, man. That's awesome. Okay, so I mean that's the VR news for this week, but we have our notes as well, and that's the week at Pantheon Plus coming up in terms of what we're offering. Our schedule for the week is as usually is on Monday nights. Drac is streaming on Twitch. He's doing EverQuest. They are midnight. All these times are Eastern, so midnight Eastern on Monday. Tuesday, we've got CryptFox doing Final Fantasy 14 in the morning, and then of course we're doing Final Fantasy 14 for Classes 101 in the evening, and CryptFox has been a part of that the last couple times we've played, so that's awesome. He's an expert when it comes to that game. He knows those battles, knows those big fights, some of the craziest mechanics that I've ever seen in an MMO. So if we hadn't had him there, I don't think we would have been as successful as we've been. So Wednesday, 9 a.m., Sparoh is putting a video on YouTube for talking about smart leashing, which we mentioned earlier. So be sure to check her channel out and get notified when that one goes up. I'll have my next lore exploring video up on Wednesday as well in the evening, and that's talking about the Waylanders, which I've had some fun with, and I'm still playing and going to continue to play. So keep making videos about that. Thursday, we've got the dev stream this week. So this is the monthly VR dev stream that we always enjoy from VR. And then, of course, right afterwards follows Pantheon Plus U with me, Drac, and the Nathan Napalm talking about breaking down what we saw and talking to folks in the green room about it. So be sure to check that out. 9 a.m. on Friday, RedbeardFlynn, our friend, is doing a Embers Adrift video on YouTube. So that's an interesting MMO that's had quite the legacy, quite the story behind it and where it's come from and where it's at now. I'm definitely interested in seeing that. I'll have a lore video coming up on Saturday next week. This one is talking about the Jinto, which are sort of a mysterious area of Pantheon's lore that I felt needed some clarification. And then Drac's going to do a video talking about design. I don't even know exactly what he's doing. I'm just looking at the calendar, but he's doing a video, and whenever it'll be up on YouTube, we'll check it out together. So that's the week coming up for February 6th to February 12th here at Pantheon.plus, and it's also this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
And honestly, there were quite a few posts probably worth mentioning here. But I figured with the DRT and all, like we'd probably be best suited to something shorter. And I've got my eye on a few threads though. So, definitely check out the forums, see if there's something that resonates with you and go and check out some of the big topics that are over there and respond. But anyway, let's take a post from Dikenzu titled "Is Worth 1,000," where they they reference that image or screenshot or concept art or whatever it was that VR used for the background of the monthly events calendar. And Dikenzu, like a lot of folks I'm sure, is wondering why VR used that picture. And again, like a lot of us, they're straining to figure out if there is some underlying message or something to glean from it. So, like, why would I bring this up? I mean, you and I like to do a little fun speculation from time to time, right?
Oh yeah, more than like. That's like our bread and butter. Sometimes that's what we do.
Well, I actually wanted to grab this because I feel like this is not really something that's talked about a lot in spite of it happening a lot. Like as dedicated gamers, we let our minds go crazy with speculation all the time. And while it, can be fun and it can be even, I would say, exciting or hype inducing, I was thinking, is it possibly hurting us? So let's check on some responses and maybe have a little chat real quick. So firstly, we've got Manuk replying saying, "Thankfully, there's very little concept art." That was just like a kind of interesting thing there. But anyway, he says, "Personally, I did not like being shown one thing and then given another by other games. Being shown something beautiful in concept art and then getting in game and not seeing that at all, but pale and pathetic facsimile has left me feeling ripped off." And Manuk ends by saying they think that the screenshot is just WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get. So maybe it's a concept art? Maybe a screenshot?
Interesting. Well, I mean, first of all, there is tons of concept art for Pantheon. I'm over the years, I mean, there's been a lot of concept art that's been released. And, I think a lot of it has translated into some of the screenshots. One of the most famous ones, and people who have been following the game for a while know this, is that shot of Fairthale Forest that I'd love to. I'll put it in the video for the YouTube video for the rewind here. But it's basically a one-to-one shot of like the arches leading into, I mean, supposedly leading into Fairthale City, with the trees and the sort of pink vines and the foliage all around. That concept art is almost a one-to-one with the screenshot. So I'm kind of on the other side of it here. I think that they've done a great job of realizing a lot of their screenshots or their concept art into screenshots.
Yeah, actually, on that note, I mean, I agree that VR has done a good job of that, at least with the things that have been referenced in games so far. But I think I get what Minook's saying. And I mean, I've got to reference like Star Citizen here because, regardless of the rest of the game, I have never seen a video game that is currently in development and technically playable that puts out so much concept art. And I think not even just because of that one project, but it's definitely led me to feel kind of like a sense of distrust and maybe even embitterment, because we'll see concept art after concept art and concept art of these places, these things that we just, at this point, we know it's either never going to happen or it's so far off. And, to their credit, when it does get in game, it often looks amazing. But the amount that they just kind of bombard the community with, I mean, there's a reason that there's like a meme of like Star Citizen selling JPEGs, and I totally understand like where that's coming from. And I think VR has been very, very good about the rate in which they release concept art. Like if they just started pushing out like a ton of concept art now, instead of like gameplay, don't you feel like maybe the community might be a little upset by that?
Yes, 100%, without a doubt. The thing is that concept art is sort of synonymous with the initial stages of design, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that is what it is. I mean, that's where things start. Everything starts as, concept artwork when you're talking about visuals. I don't think I'm remiss in saying that. So what it tells people is we're at the beginning stages, and nobody wants to hear that with Pantheon. Nobody wants to hear that
Yes.
with Star Citizen. I mean, games that have been in development for a long time. I mean, to be fair. But we have to remember that, the world content is not developed at the same pace, right? So there's not concept art done for every single area of the world or every single piece of content that's going to be in the game. Not all that's done at the very beginning stages of development. It's done when they start working on that area of the world. I'm thinking about like a video I did talking about Wild's End last year before. I was looking at the concept art and it's so detailed. There's talk of like the dragonfly wings that are used as like decorations in Sohirith, and the lamps are these candle root bulb lamps. And the thing about concept art is awesome is it's so there's little notations on it, right? And you can pick up those notations and then you can speculate out from there, or you can sort of theory craft from there. So in that sense, I think that, if they don't fulfill that, or if that detail isn't there in the final product, yes, then the concept art's a problem. But if you're going to do those kind of details, it really is like sort of a tease. It's like whetting your appetite for that kind of level of detail to be in the final product.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the key, right? Is there has to be an element of trust that it will become in the final product, because so many gamers have seen concept art and derived or speculated that, these notes from artists are, certainly going to be part of the game when it's, notes from artists, right? They have. But is
that a bad thing, right? Like, that's the question.
That is the question.
Is it better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all?
Oh, man. Okay. Well, okay. Before we get into a full thing with that, let's get to the other side of this conversation. We've got Chenzime or Chenzime, who I would love to summarize this post, but I think it's just beautifully said. So I will just read it in full. So bear with me here. So Chenzime says, I'm of the counter school, Minook. Even though they may be representing the same subject matter, concept art and computer rendering are obviously not the same beast. It's like comparing an experience of a beautiful sunset to a photograph or a painting of one. They can all be very beautiful and all be priceless in their own way, but not for the same reason. I take each for what it is, and that's how I look at conceptual art. And the finished computer render, or in-game footage, I think is what they mean. I love to see how things are conceptualized from start to finish, from initial sketch to finished product. I love to find the differences and understand why the changes occurred, whether that was for a technical reason or a change of mind or whatever. For me, it adds to the final product and doesn't diminish it, hopefully with respect. More concept art will be made available on the web pages to sate my hunger for such material. So it sounds like this is you.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a pretty good summarization of my position. I mean, when you were talking, you were reading that, and he was comparing, a picture of a sunset to a real sunset, and how, of course, it's not the same. But then you can also say, like, you could say a computer rendering is not the same as the real thing either, right? Like, and of course they're not, but we're, in our space, in the video game space, the rendering is the ultimate thing, right? That's what we're trying to replicate. So the concept art doesn't get created based off the rendering. The rendering gets created based off the concept art. So we're not working backwards like we are in real life, where you're painting a sunset from the real thing, right? So you have to keep that in mind, that it flows in a different direction.
That is a good point. And I mean, I think the key of that is considering that flow. I think what I was initially against in this topic was that feeling like concept art may have started to mislead the audience, the gamers that are expecting these things. But it sounds like at least a decent amount of gamers have either started to disregard those notes or simply accept that they may not actually be part of the game, but still have fun with it anyway. And I can really appreciate that. I mean, I love Jared's concept art as much as anyone. I just am always afraid of not setting correct expectations, right? That's kind of my thing.
It's funny, I know where you're coming from, but I can't get behind that yet. I'm of the mind that those details are going to be in the game, and those details are so, like, part of my mental image of Pantheon and Terminus when we get in there, what it's going to be. And I'm going to be looking for those things, and I'm going to be looking for, okay, I remember this note on this concept art piece talked about this tree and this vine, and what is it called? Because for me, that's the details are very important, and the little details like that. That
is true. And when those details exist from the beginning, I'm sure it makes the whole process culminate to better product, right? So right. I get that. And so also Grimlock kind of mentioned, and I'll remind the audience that they did indeed just hire a new concept artist, and that maybe we might be seeing more concept art soon. But then again, we've got Dorothea coming in, wants to temper expectations a bit, noting that VR's version of a hire is often not the same thing as a big studio, and that sometimes these folks are just part-time or consultants or however, contract workers, or something like that. Although I don't think they list those on the website, but still, I'm with this. I think we talked previously about being curious how this new concept art might either differ from Jared's or how it's going to be. But either way, I'm glad they're hiring people, whether it's part-time or whatever. But I think I might just be a little more jaded, man. I think
so too, and that's fine. I think it's just the way that we, it's our differences in terms of what creates the world in our mind. Like my world is created in terms of looking at some of that concept art, and I'm thinking about the pictures of from Thronefest. There's a lot of concept art that details the buildings in Thronefest very very detailed. And I love that. I mean, because I think it translates then into books you find in the world. I think you find lore in the world that talks about Osiriko's hammer in the plaza, right? And when you see that concept art, you're like, okay, like even if it doesn't look like that exactly in the game, I mean, that's, of course, we're not living in a one-to-one simulation of, Jared Pullen's, mind,
Ooh, man, there'd be a lot of gas bats.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that would be a horrendous world to live in, piercing world to live in, if you will. But yeah, no. But again, the point being that I very much enjoy the concept art, and this discussion has really given me a good idea in terms of something I'd like to do, and a video idea that I think could be very valuable. So I'll keep that under my hat for now, but this is a good discussion.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we could spur something on here. But yeah, I think for me, just to kind of like wrap it up, I still feel like expectations kind of go hand in hand with speculation. And I think for some people, as I'm realizing, that's fine. You can separate those two things. But I think for a lot of people, that speculation turns into expectation. And when that hype meter, gets a little crazy and expectations aren't met, it just comes crashing down for people. And so I still prefer that WYSIWYG kind of thing that Manuk mentioned. And I love teasers. I love trailers and concept art and all this stuff. I can really enjoy it, but it doesn't get me so excited that, as I'll feel when I get in game and I realize that it was real, and what went from paper or digital art to in-game experience is, not less than what was expected. I will be super excited at that point, I think.
That's totally fair. Totally fair. And I think that's probably good advice. I think it's probably good advice.
Awesome. Well, good talk. And that is going to be it for this week's community discussion. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, no introductions this week, at least not publicly. Yes, that's a reminder for y'all with the special forum access to go check your new people. But we do have plenty of new community content in the Pantheon space. So let's get started. We've got on the fan fiction side, Crowsingers in the Sway of Storms, Chapter 19 on the official forums and the Pantheon Plus website. So go check that out, especially if you've been following the story.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in there and say, I always say it during the premiere in the chat, but the artwork you're seeing during this segment of the Rewind a lot of it is Crowsinger's art. She is amazing at her artwork, and I always just want to give her credit. So there you go.
That's great. Maybe I should just work that in, call out everyone.
No, it's my fault. I'm forgetful and lazy, so I'm just saving myself the work from doing it on Sunday now. So
okay. Well, good stuff. And it is all amazing, and I've loved seeing how all the pieces go with her stories too. It's nice touch. On the video side, we've actually got a ton of stuff from last week for videos. So. You mentioned Sparoh might be doing a video next week or this coming week, but I gotta call out, Sparoh did an awesome introduction to Pantheon or summary or whatever you want to call it video on YouTube, which was so good that Pantheon promoted it that Kilson promoted it as a community highlight. It's called New to Pantheon. Here's the gist. And that's exactly what it is. It's such a good little refresher or summary or whatever. Yeah.
How's that for the first video?
She's hitting the ground running. Oh my gosh.
And she gets promoted by VR. So
yeah,
sweet.
Absolutely. And so if you haven't already, go check that out. Even if you follow Pantheon, it's just a great little recap. And of course, got to subscribe to her because this obviously isn't her last video. So,
Right.
and then we've got Nathan Napalm putting out a video about how Pantheon brings the magic of old school MMORPGs in spite of the times just being different and from like when those classic games came out. And man, it is just really well put together, like really well scripted. Like it got my blood flowing for sure.
Yeah, Nathan could sell me anything, honestly. Like if I was like, dying of thirst in a waterfall, he would sell me water. I'd buy it. The guy knows what he's doing.
But it was like so good of a like kind of recap of differentiating features and thought process, not just features, but like how
Right.
VR is, that I would love to like show to friends that, so just to explain, like, it's not the same cycle we've gone through so many times, it's different. Yeah. Anyway, on the maybe lesser known content creator side, we've got CaffeineInjected. Did kind of this like casual video going through the combat AI video from a while back and giving some commentary. Now the whole video isn't about Pantheon, but this one definitely falls into that like feels like you're chatting with your friend kind of category.
Yep.
Yeah.
CaffeineInjected has been around a long time, actually. He's been in the Pantheon communities for maybe before I even really started following closely. So he's just one of those people that's always in the background and has been patient and, chimes in here and there and does a video occasionally. So I really appreciate that sort of, sticking around, stick-to-itiveness, I guess.
Yeah. And so, but if you like that kind of video, I mean, you'll probably like this one. And like I said, it has all sorts of other things on his account too. So, and then we've also got, kind of in that same realm, CorryDGaming has several new videos with that kind of feel of talking to a friend. And this is going to be part 2 of the races of Terminus, and moving on to the classes now. So Corey's gone through the Cleric, the Dire Lord, the Druid, and the Enchanter, just going through the pages and giving commentary, and it's just a very chill vibe kind of a thing. So really cool stuff.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, Corey's been putting out so many videos. It's kind of crazy. But yeah. And of course, we've got RedbeardFlynn with a video of this new Getting Classy series, which, dude, I just love this. I mean, I was talking to you about this before we started recording.
Mm-hmm. Anybody who wears a suit for their video gets bumped to the top of the list. Like, he's put so much effort into this. Oh my gosh, I cannot be bothered to make this kind of a video. This would be way too much work for me. I don't know how he, finds the time and the energy to do all this, but it's pretty amazing.
Seriously. I mean, I've become quite a Redbeard fanboy, that's for sure. But I just love like the fun elements he kind of just brings to the table of, all the Pantheon content creators, because we've got a lot of uniqueness for sure. And like, I always think of Nathan, jokingly speaking, but Redbeard's in his own thing. Like he does his own like kind of style, and like I said, he puts so much effort into his videos. And like I said, this is going to be the Getting Classy, so talking about classes, and of all classes, he starts with the Necromancer.
Yeah, like he picked the most obscure one, like not afraid of a challenge.
Absolutely.
So if you're into like Necro and Bard information, Necro, in particular, obviously, this is the great video because it's actually hard to find that information and put it all together. And he did a really good job of it.
Yep. So go check it out. It's fantastic. So, but that's going to be it for this week's Community Spotlight.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. Okay, so our Tale of Terminus continues this week. Last week, we heard about the Jinto, and we learned about the beginnings of the Age of Chaos, and now we are in the thick of it. The Deicide War has come to fruition and is in full swing. So we're going to learn a little bit about the preamble to that and the first few years of the Deicide War, and how it is in the process of getting to its point of resolution, although we aren't quite there yet, and we're not going to finish the Age of Chaos this week. We'll finish it next week because it's a long section here, but I didn't want to spend too much time on one part. But so sit back as we return to the Age of Chaos on Terminus, as I read you the words of the very talented J.N. Gerhardt, Pantheon's lead writer, to bring you the lore you know. Therefore did each pairing begin immediate preparations. The Burning Sanctum would be constructed in the petrified forest of Ka-Kalar, the Silent Sanctum nestled behind a natural choke point in the mountain roads, the Frozen Sanctum buried in the storm drifts of tenebrous tundra. Each megalithic hulk was conceived with the aim of housing the races for as long as necessary once they had bled as much attrition out of the Revenant and the High Mortal armies as possible. In short, coffins to outlast the night. Thus, in 481, the Deicide War, or War of Gods, came of age on Terminus. After years of smaller conflicts that felled countless nations, cities, and peoples, some forcibly joined with the Revenant, others devoured into extinction. The direct assaults on the 3 continents of the 6 officially consummated in total war. The defense of each was long-suffering, grinding, and acknowledged to be futile. For, aside from causes, there was no equal to the High Mortals on the field of battle, and certainly no accounting for the massive Revenant and their allies. What is clear is that Haethus Krevgil fared the worst, and found the Teeth of Tenebrous difficult to overcome by itself. At Vezu, Causus was asked, "But what natural defense shall the Frozen Sanctum have?" To which he famously replied, Tenebrous, and Tenebrous alone. The Archaean dwarves waged a choreographed campaign of elusiveness in shrewd tandem, denying the dead heiress an open field to fit with her numerical advantage. The effectiveness was great. Enraged, Haethus Krevgil was finally given an opportunity when word came that the Frozen Sanctum itself was located amidst the blinding squalls. At this news, she ordered the Magin Key create columns of infernal black flame to burn constantly, slowly encroaching upon the refuge from each side of the Tenebrous. This forced the dwarves and the Archaea to face a traditional battle, which they deeply prefer, but could not endure to the degree of their War of Shadow. Eventually, the Sanctum was entered by nearly all. Kingsreach did not fare as well. The island has only the Rones as a natural defense, and while both the humans and elves made their hold around and on it respectively, there was little choice but to meet Osari's vast forces on the field of battle. Assistance in this came from the Moskag warriors and the Alvanan giants, as well as the enigmatic assassins of the Red Raven. But despite their valor, beautiful Havensong became the last bulwark of defense, with the Silent Sanctum hidden in the Rones behind. In perhaps the most mournful episode of the entire war, Havensong fell along with the human king Amensal, and the betrayer Osari demanded the entire city be wiped from the plain and carried off. Halting his army from any pursuit into the Rones, Osari personally verified that every last timber, stone, and hinge was removed from the scorched landscape and dropped off cliffs into the sea miles away. This took 3 days, and it was not until the effort was finished did he march on the Sanctum. Rainfall hosted the most brutal fighting. At first, there was something of a valiant return to victory for the ogres. The legendary army of Broken Maw attacked the Revenant on their own camps, and they marshaled onto the banks of the frigid Northlands. After this ambush, the Darkmer waited patiently beneath the icy surface for an armada of Revenant transports and set upon them with murderous glee, sinking, burning, and climbing on the decks of the silent convoy as it passed through the night. So fierce was their zeal that the ogres assembled on the shoreline, expecting some ships to pass through, but watched in astonishment until their allies finished the fight. Not a ship survived. It seemed an easy victory, which under normal terms would have perhaps granted these 2 members a total triumph, which they likely would not have announced to the remaining 4. Yet, this was the army of the Ravaging Lord, and the only terms were his own. He unbound ancient monsters of the deep against the Darkmer, and soon their unparalleled advantage was forfeit. According to the ogres, he enticed the hounds of Wasche to assault Broken Maw from the north, while a Revenant force marched up from the desert of Kaja in the south. the Waschi vehemently refutes this account, which became the initiator of the 7th and 12th War between the two nations. Unable to defend the twin or lone assaults, the ogres withdrew across Rainfall to Kakalar and the Burning Sanctum. Thus, Itero's long-standing prophecy was becoming manifest with each scorching victory. In 484, Havensong fell. Rel Siren of the Archive was slain after sealing himself outside the door of the Frozen Sanctum, and the Ravaging Lord found a means to stop the magma moat flowing around the Burning Sanctum. It seemed that midnight was drawing nigh. And that is the lore you know. So again, thank you everybody for hanging out. That is the end of episode 88. Desrin, as always, my friend, I appreciate your robust nature. I hope you know.
Well, thank you for your neighborly attitude. And I keep a list, right? Like,
do you really?
I totally.
Is this going to be like when we get into Pantheon? Are we going to be like titles? Like my title will be neighborly ranger and the robust druid and all this. Kind of
perhaps
stuff.
I'll send it to VR. One of these days for launch. That'll be my launch gift.
Nice. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Anyway, thank you everyone for hanging out with us today. Remember, all our links are in the show notes and the video description for all the content we discussed. We'd love it if you would leave a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have a podcast, if you're listening to this on audio only, go to your podcast provider on iTunes or Spotify, whatever that is. Leave a review. We'd love to hear feedback as always. But have a great week, everyone, and we will see you next time.
All right, bye all.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.